My name is Sam Pennington. I'm a construction buyer for film and television, but before that, I was a office PA for a long time.
Awesome. And give us the highlights of how you worked your way up the ladder.
So I went to film school in North Carolina, and I had my first couple of jobs were up there before the film incentives got kiboshed. So I did that for about a year and a half. Then everything fell through and we all had to move to Atlanta and I had to start over. So basically what I did there was just went back to start doing day playing jobs. And basically the way I treat every day playing job is just a paid interview. So you just go in there and you're just super chipper all day and you're super extra helpful. And then that started turning into recommendations from those coordinators to other ones. And I eventually started doing a full run of show jobs. And then I did jobs for a lot longer than most people do, mostly because I was pretty picky about what I wanted to transition into. But being in the production office and then later in art department as a PA gave me a lot of opportunity to interact with a lot of people. So like I got to talk to producers and locations people and accounting and everything. So I got a really good sense of what every other department was doing before I made the decision to go into construction.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that is smart. What are the common tasks of an office PA and specifically on the production side?
Yeah. So the biggest thing for an office PA is doing purchase orders and just accounting paperwork in general. Most people will either have it as they'll set and do the order and then you just fill out the paperwork for them, or some people will have you do the entire order. But it's pretty much the most important thing that you have to know. And the biggest thing is that every place you go is going to do it slightly differently. So it's just a good idea to just consult with them and just sort of defer to their judgment on it. And then there's really, it kind of, it depends a little bit. Some places, like, they don't let PAs touch any insurance paperwork. They're very dogged about it and won't let them see it. In other places, they have, the PA does all of that. So generally, if you enter into a new job, I typically just sort of offer to do every piece of paperwork that comes up, just as a way to sort of see what you can and can't do. The biggest one is food, either craft services or lunch. And a lot of people really hate doing it because it's not specifically related to film, but it is the biggest way to get fired as a PA is to do a shitty job at lunch. Basically, if it's done well, people will notice it, and if it's not, then it just erases everything else. It's I guess what I'm saying is the most public of all your activities. So no one's gonna know you were doing really good on your POs and stuff if you are always getting really crappy tacos for lunch. A lot of people sort of ignore it and they pass it off to like another PA, but that's been a lot of times where I've come in as a day player, and if you do just a stupid good job at crafty, they'll start to see like, well, what else are you good at?
And what kind of distro did you do as a PA?
Distro is actually really really stressful at first, but becomes really fun. So usually they do it in shifts. So the morning PA comes in and does it's all the stuff from the football. So all the production reports that coming from set, make a bunch of copies of those and get those to all the department heads. And there's usually, and it varies by production. Sometimes it varies by block, but some people want some people want the PR and all the extra skins and all these various different things. So that becomes another complicated part of learning the office. But again, once you start to learn that, you start to get to know, say, the UPM. Once you know exactly how they want everything, they start to take a shine to you, and then you get to learn more about their job.
Can you go ahead and cover what you mean by the football? And then I know what's different, like with production versus art, is you guys did have the morning and evening kind of shifts. So if you can go into that a little bit.
Sure. So the football is, I don't know what its life is on set, but it's usually a little accordion file, and inside that there's a lot of documents basically of what happened the previous day. You have the Exhibit Gs, which are the SAG forms for when the actors worked. You've got how much shots they took, all the stuff for editing. So it used to be, feet of film, and now it's just how many hard drives they did. So all that basically gets copied. Some of it gets sent out to the network. Some of it has to stay inside. Some of it goes to accounting. It's a big sort of complicated thing. It's the first thing that you do if you're on morning shift. Usually then in addition to that daily distro, every time a new script comes out, you have to print out a jillion of them and hand them out. And script distro is probably where you're going to learn how to be really patient, because no one on a film production is. And so every single person walks into the copy room thinking they're the most important person and tries to get theirs early, or like get theirs like moved up in the stack. So that's a good way to sort of learn also how to placate people. Schedules are pretty much the same thing. Then for if you have evening shift stuff, the distro tends to be that usually is when scripts come out, because the writer's room decides that they're going to have something out by, say, Thursday, and so they'll have it done by 5 p.m. LA time. So it's then 8 p.m. on the East Coast, and then you have to print 50 scripts at night.
And what was the average length of day in production?
For in the production office, it's 12 hours, pretty much minimum. There was never really a day that we did 10 unless it was wrap, and even then it wasn't. It's a lot of what the production office is staffing the other departments. So even if there isn't something to do, you still have to be there in case an emergency comes up. And there tends to be more opportunities for ending up doing overtime, just because it'll be right before you leave, and then an actor gets sick and you have to find a doctor who will prescribe a Z-Pack over the phone or whatever it is. They have pretty much the most ridiculous hours. And then also a lot of places will try to staff the shooting crew, even if they're shooting at location. So if they're doing a night shoot, you're going to be, and the shooting crew goes to midnight, the office goes to midnight. And I'm always surprised at how many people on set don't realize that, because a lot of people on set for some reason think that the office knocks off at 5, which always chews me off, because it's like, well, we get calls from you guys at 10 p.m. So did you think we're at home? But yeah, so they're pretty ridiculous hours, but you do have the advantage of you're coming into the same place each time versus on set where you're like, God only knows.
Awesome. And what are your biggest do's and don'ts for an office PA?
Biggest do is write everything down. I always have even today, as a buyer, I always have a notebook or a Post-it note or something. And if somebody says anything to you, no matter how simple it is and how easy you think it might be for you or them to remember, you just write it down. And part of that is because there's so much information flying around, you will forget things that you didn't think you would. And then the other things that just demonstrates to whoever's talking that you're actually listening. So that was my biggest, every single day, the most important thing that I could have was having just a little notebook and a pen to write down. There's so many times where it came in handy where someone was like, who was that vendor we got, whatever stupid, because there's always some weird bizarre thing that you had to buy. So like, oh, where did we get purple traffic cones from? And you have it in your notebook and you go back and look it up. So it makes you really indispensable as a repository of information. The biggest don't, I think, is don't flatter the higher ups, because in the biggest way is it makes you look sad. So like if you have a director who's coming on to direct a block, say, who's really great, and they come in and they've got their luggage and stuff, and they're trying to figure everything out. They don't want to see somebody come up and say, I really loved that movie you made 10 years ago. And then in a different way, like if you're seeing storyboards from someone, or just the result of anyone's work on the show, you can tell them it's great, but it's better to ask a question about how they did it more so. That shows more engagement. Because if you tell, like, there's one production designer that was on a show who did all hand-drawn concept art, and he would just be deluged by people stopping by and going, wow, that was really great, you drew that, it was really good. And it just sort of interrupted his work, and he didn't remember any of them. So if you have an interest in a job, instead of saying that's really great, say that's great, how did you do this part, or whatever.
That's smart. I like that.
But yeah, just generally, and it comes off really insincere a lot of the time. And they're all normal people, and it's really odd to have a stranger come up and start complimenting you, versus talking to someone about the nitty-gritty of their job. They're usually pretty excited to talk about. And then the other thing, and I don't know how to phrase this as a do or don't, is to ask more questions than to say statements. Because especially as a PA, and especially as a new PA, you don't know how little you know. And I think by asking questions,
new information's revealed sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many times where I see day players or somebody come in and they don't ask questions. They just presume that they know how everything is run, and then when you come back to check their work at the end of the day, it's all fudged up. And a lot of people, I think, are reluctant to ask a question because it shows that they're ignorant or that they're inexperienced. And to that, I really say, well, you are inexperienced, and that's okay, and that's part of the job. And everybody you work for is going to be so much happier to answer a stupid question at 10 in the morning than to have to correct your mistakes at 3 in the afternoon. Like, you should ask the question, and then if they think you're stupid, who cares? At least you did the job right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I really like your answers. These are great. How did you get hired when you first started off, like, getting your end versus how do you get hired now? Like, do you see a difference?
Yeah, so when it first started, so like just taking it from coming to Atlanta, it was all contact. It was from people who were on my level. So I got a day playing job on Pitch Perfect 3 from Meredith, who was also on APA. But then once I did that and I started to get coordinators who knew me, then it was based on coordinator recommendations. And usually I would find out that I'd been recommended for the job when I got the call to go into the job, if that makes sense. Like, it usually would be so-and-so calls me up and says, hey, I talked to Lauren Lebo. She says you're great. Can you start Monday? Now, and especially in the position I'm in now, because the construction buyer comes in and wraps basically with the construction coordinator, who's the department head, versus when you're a office PA, you're going to be coming in a little bit earlier than, say, the producers are, and the production coordinator might come in earlier than you. So you're not going to be able to work with the same crew each time because of the way that they come in and out staggered. So that way you're like actively seeking work a lot more often. Yeah.
Awesome. And what are some tips you have for how to format a resume and what should be on it?
The resume is it's a weird and it's kind of a controversial thing because there's a lot of different ways to format it, and a lot of times once you've got the contacts built up, they won't really be looking at the resume, or not as closely. But that being said, it is still really important to have it in a good state, because you might get somebody who doesn't know any contacts of yours. So in that case, the biggest thing to highlight is prior experience with the show name, and then who, and I didn't do this for a long time, but putting your direct supervisor on there, because that's the way they'll know it. If it's a big show that they've heard of, that demonstrates some sort of value to them. And if it's something they've never heard of, but they know the coordinator you worked for, that should demonstrate. They're like, oh, I know that guy. He's a hard ass, so you must have been pretty good to survive that. And then putting skills that are specific to tasks versus, say, so don't put Photoshop on your resume, but put maybe photo retouching or flyer design or something like that. And even if that doesn't seem like something that is applicable to the job, still include it. I ended up doing so much Photoshop as a production office PA, which is not in any way part of the job description. But it, again, it sort of comes up, and then those little weird skills that you don't think are valuable become part of the reason why you're getting hired again. You've got these weird little esoteric skills. So those are the two big things. I wouldn't highlight a whole lot of outside of film work. Put it on there if you don't have any film work, obviously, but make sure that underneath there's tasks that are related back to film stuff. So if you have a job in an office before that had a bunch of paperwork, maybe include that. But don't put 30 student films on there.
So that's a good point of something that I talk about in a previous video is while you're in school, get work, intern, or PA on professional sets, because they're going to hire you as a PA, not a director because you've directed your short film or whatever. So, say someone didn't do that, they have no professional film experience, just what was, they were exposed to in college, and say they don't have very great applicable work experience. Do you have any advice on what can they put down?
Yeah. So if you've got, say, you do have film experience from student films, is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
But not. Yeah. So one of the things that I did for my student work was, and the biggest thing is that for student work, you, like you said, you're put down as the director and the production designer, but it's you weren't. It's not the same caliber once you get into a professional level. So putting down what you actually did, because there wasn't any PA on your student film, you were doing PA stuff at some point. So putting down those relevant things. So there was a movie, it was a stop motion movie that I did. It was a thesis that I was technical director for. But I put that on my resume, I think, as how did I describe it? It was scheduling and problem solving or whatever, technical solutions, stuff like that, which aren't really applicable, but at the same time, people saw that on my resume and then asked me to fix it right there. And but just sort of breaking it down as to actually what your everyday stuff. If you were making coffee, actually, that if you made coffee every day for your crew, that's something that surprisingly not every PA knows how to do. So there's something, just going and breaking it down into the specific things.
What are some basic terms in paperwork an office PA should know?
So you should definitely know all the department heads, and there's probably a very great resource for that. And then this is just because you'll get something where someone says, we got to get this to the gaffer. And if you have no idea who or what department that's in, you're not even going to be able to find it on the crew list. So knowing that is a big thing. Biggest thing, you're going to have to do POs, which is purchase order. Football is one you pretty much have to know in advance, because it doesn't even sound like paperwork. It's just called the football because it gets passed back and forth. Exhibit G, that's a SAG form. COI, certificate of insurance, you frequently need to send that to vendors. Getting a W-9 from a vendor. Check request, there's a lot of internal documents like check request, purchase order, petty cash form. A lot of it is accounting related, and you're not going to know all of them going into it. One piece of advice I gave to another PA when they were just starting out, and they said it helped out, was anytime someone says, have you ever done X or whatever? If someone says, hey, have you ever done a PO before? And you have no idea what that is, always say no, but I'm excited to learn. Because just don't again, don't say like, oh yeah, totally, and then do a terrible job at it. But express that you're willing to learn that. But there's going to be something weird that's going to come up. There's going to be some network specific forms and people. So anytime you hear an unknown term, feel free to pipe up, even if it's in a conversation between two other people. Obviously, don't interrupt. But after the fact, if you said, once the producer leaves, you can say, hey, what's a COI? And then write it down in your notebook to demonstrate that you're learning.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point of like, when I was first starting off, mainly like on set, and on set you get a little bit of you fake it until you make it, because it's so fast paced that you gotta
Right.
figure things out a little bit more in that way, but you obviously make more mistakes that way, but you learn.
Mhm.
But with that, I was always told to never say I don't know. So like
Mhm.
saying no, but can you show me or tell me, like, having that call of action, I think is good to show like, you know, it doesn't end there. And I
Right.
think that's smart.
And speaking of that, that is a good point. That I would say that for things that are routine, like if they make it sound like, okay, can you fill out these POs for me? And this is something that happens every day. That's something where you're like, I don't know, show me. If they say, we need to find a shin splint that'll fit a 12-year-old, something that's off the wall. That's a point where you're going to have to be self-motivated and just figure that out yourself. So it's just sort of knowing what is the thing where it's like, this is something critical that happens every day, has to happen in this format, versus no one's done it. Just figure it out.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I think PAs really struggle with that, especially when everyone's super busy. Like, you see your boss is crazy busy, and I've had PAs tell me, well, I didn't want to ask you because you were so busy. But I'm like you said, like, there is a certain way certain things have to be done. But then there are scenarios where I'm like, you have to figure it out. And it's true, I'm not available to hold your hand. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's a tricky balance of like, yeah, but I think you phrased it well, of like, it's the everyday things that is specific to the job versus, the new unexpected things that, come up. I think that's a good way to box those two things. Let's
and
see.
and a way for both of those, if it is something that's routine, or if it's something that you might have to go off and do yourself, is to bring it back for feedback. So if it is, you're doing purchase order, do the first one, hand it to them and say, is this right or wrong? If they're, if they're sending you, and uh, it happens a lot of times where they'll ask you to find something that they don't know what the answer is to. So frequently, like in the production office, if it's the producer or the actor wants some weird sushi or something like that, um, finding the first result that you think might be along that path and showing it to them, and they can very quickly say yes or no. That can help you. And a lot of times, it's like, a lot of people in film are very visual, so they're going to have a conversation where it's rambling and they don't really know what they're trying to say. Versus if you show them a picture of it, they can very quickly say yes or no, or yes, but this part only. So that's a big part of it, is to find just go ahead and start it, and then say, how am I doing so far? And then you can kind of get a better gauge of what stuff is.
Awesome. Love it. If any other basic knowledge comes up, but other things to have as an office PA, I had written down car and computer.
Yeah, reliable transportation, having your own computer, and a lot of times having additional software to go along with it. Microsoft Office, possibly anything that you might know. I wouldn't say buy Photoshop if you've never used it, but if you do know Photoshop, having it on your computer for when someone needs something really quick. Someone needs to make parking signs really quick and they need the show logo on it or whatever it is. So additional software is a big thing. The notebook and a spare notebook. In film, there's a very, very relaxed dress code. And if you're on set, that makes a lot of sense because you're going to be moving and sweating and all that stuff. But if you're in the office, you're still going to be doing a little bit of that stuff, but not as much. So I always try to dress a little bit nicer than casual. I usually would wear just button-down shirts, even if that was with jeans, and frequently got comments on on the appearance, on my appearance, and when somebody shows up, even if they're in a position of power and there's someone they're wearing a t-shirt and you're wearing a button-down, it somehow you get a little bit more respect. And I still do that even in construction, where all the guys are wearing shorts that are covered in paint and everything like that. It just gets sort of just sort of demonstrates a little bit of commitment to the job, and gets you a little bit. It's just like a little. It's not hugely important. It's not like it's going to get you hired as a director or whatever, but it just sort of it's a little extra thing that I think helps.
What is the current going rate for an office PA?
I think it's still 10 in most places, $10 an hour. It may be up a little bit more. If you're on a nicer show, you can get 12, but that's kind of few and far between. Basically, a lot of what being a PA is getting paid in experience. It's a little bit unfair with the amount of work that you do, because now I'm in a union position, and some days I have really, really easy days, and I've never had an easy day as a PA. But so the pay is not fantastic, but the biggest thing is getting the experience out of it, and making sure you exploit that by talking to, especially when you're in the production office, you get to interact with every single department. You get to talk to people in the network and agents and all sorts of stuff. And if you do it right, you can ask them a little question about their job, and you get to learn everything about where you want to go next. So a lot of what I did as a PA was learning exactly which departments I never want to go into. I know I don't ever want to be a cast assistant. I know I don't ever want to be in locations, just because I just went through and I got to learn what their day-to-day actions were, and that's really the way that you get paid. So you can really leave a lot of that on the table just by not interacting with other departments. So I think it's just a really important thing to do.
You're absolutely right. It's the people that are hungry, basically, like they want to learn, they have that thirst, versus like kind of the worst way you can be is assuming you know everything, like you were saying, and that those are the ones that make the most mistakes, and they're the ones that honestly don't stick around of like and I think it's super valuable, like you're saying, to know at least like the highlights of what each department does, and not only to identify them for distro, but like just seeing how all the pieces fit together. Like it helps you do your job better and keep that communication flow. What other advice do you like to share? Things like
the food, and basically any dummy job that you're sort of in the back of your mind, you're thinking, this is degrading. Why did I, this is not filmmaking. Those are the jobs that become the Mr. Miyagi paint the fence type thing that'll actually yield skills that will become applicable in any position that you go into later. So finding out, if you're doing, if you're ordering catering for the entire production, that's going to teach you about, follow-up, planning ahead, sort of organizing all the different moving parts in the office. There's going to be someone who's vegan, someone who's allergic to onions and stuff like that. Once you get to all those different parts together, then you have, that's basically just project management. Now you can go on and if you become a graphic designer or whatever, these are still things that are transferable outside of it. Yes, you're still ordering tacos, but you're really learning what things are critical and what aren't. I mentioned the flattery thing. Yeah, generally. Oh, and the asking questions about other people's jobs. Do it for jobs that you don't want to do. Or most I've learned is from accounting, which I knew from the very beginning I had no interest in. But every show I try to learn something else from accounting, and it just makes my job a little bit easier, understanding what they do with the form after I give it to them. And then as a result, I mean, sometimes you'll find a position that you didn't think you'd be interested in. Like, I didn't think that I would be interested in construction, but by interacting with my current boss, I met when I was a PA, and I would just go and ask him stupid questions like, "What's this belt sander?" I don't know. And from that, I learned that construction usually works 10 hours. I learned about how much paperwork and accounting stuff that they do over there that I already know that I can transfer over. So it became an option for me that I wouldn't have known otherwise.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Sam. These are
Yeah.
some really fantastic nuggets, so thank you.